between the Sontarans and the Rutans.
It's been raging far out in the stars for
50,000 years. 50,000 years of bloodshed. And for what?
For victory! Sontaran! 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 Sontaran!
Give me a break.
Hello there. In today's video we are going to be taking a look at the Sontarans from Doctor Who, possibly, in my opinion, one of the most warlike races in sci-fi. I mean, I know there's a lot of contenders to this, hence this series, but they're definitely one of the most warlike species in Doctor Who. Now, in Doctor Who there are quite a few warrior races, sometimes even humans categorized as that, but in this specific occasion I decided to go with the Sontarans over maybe a more famous race like the Daleks or the Cybermen, simply because those races have other goals. The Daleks certainly are a warrior race, but as a culture they're in many ways they're a lot more complex than you sometimes take them for at face value. The same with the Cybermen. They have a goal. They're not so much a race of warriors as they are more like a virus, infecting world with the basically like a cybonic plague. But the Sontarans don't have any other goal. They just want to fight. A bit like the orcs from Warhammer in a way, the Sontarans are literally bred for war, and that's all they do. Hence, that's what this video is going to be about. We're going to look at their origins, who they are, why they fight, what happened to the race that created them, and some of their appearances within Doctor Who. Before we get into that, just a moment to say, if you like this video or any others that I'm making on this channel, please like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon if you really like them. And with that said, let's get started. The Sontaran race was created eons ago by a race called the Kavich to help them fight a war against the Rutans, a war that had been raging for many years and one they were not winning. In order to help them win, they began to supplement their forces by using clone soldiers. These would be the Sontarans. The Sontarans, in their own words, their small size and diminutive appearance was created to exact warrior specifications, although it's more likely their small size was a result of the higher gravitational pull of their homeworld, which was considerably more than Earth's, to the magnitude of 5. This would result in the Sontarans being smaller generally, and also would explain their increased strength and density compared to a human, or for that matter pretty much any other race that they fight. The Sontarans continued to wage the war against the Rutans no matter what, even when peace was a possibility, eventually slowly replacing the race that originally created them, to the point where the race who originally they were fighting for no longer existed. There were no female Sontaran, they were only created through cloning, and there were none of the Kavich left to reproduce naturally. So all Sontaran are clones, and they are all left of the Kavich civilization, and the only real legacy of the Kavich has been this eternal war against the Rutans, which the Sontarans have, despite their aggressive nature and endless war, have not yet been able to completely defeat. The Sontarans as a race are, as I said, all clones, which means there isn't much in the way of diversity amongst their species, which could lead to being a weakness if someone could develop a bioweapon against them. However, there is some genetic variation within Sontarans, possibly due to the fact that there may be more than one original genetic sample being used to create them, but apparently all Sontarans are genetically indistinguishable from one another. But there are some variations, which may include slight changes in height, the number of fingers, and some Sontarans even having vestigial hair, as the race that they spawned from very likely did. This, in the case of the Sontarans though, was only ever facial hair, or some other sort of odd strands. Their general appearance is squat, only averaging about 5 feet in height, very muscular, generally bald, and often compared to a potato with lasers by humans who actually see them visually under their armor. Their armor itself is very advanced and very tough and good as an all-environmental suit. It does have one weakness which has been deliberately placed in the armor, which is a sign of strength for the Sontarans, but also a means of ensuring that their troops always face the enemy. To the Sontarans, surrender and retreat are not options. They don't surrender, they don't retreat. They fight to the death because they consider dying in battle to be the ultimate honor, the ultimate glory. Nothing will prevent that. They will never surrender. As a result, on the back of the armor there is a port that, if it is directly struck by a weapon or even a solid object, can render the Sontaran unconscious or kill them. This means that the Sontarans have a vested interest in not turning their back to an enemy, or for that matter always managing to cover their flanks so an enemy can't sneak up behind them. This forces the Sontarans to use tactics and fight strategically, but also to face their enemy in what they consider to be honourable combat. This usually means the Sontarans prefer direct invasion or direct confrontation with an enemy without, say, resorting to tactics like planetary bombardment or the use of biogenetic or transgenic weapons. As stated before, the Sontarans were a race of clones. As a culture, though, they were a martial culture, which basically means their entire society was predicated around the idea of war. The Sontarans wanted to be at war at all times. They always were looking for a fight, and they hated if a big war, such as the Time War, would go on and they would be excluded from it, which was a conflict they effectively were not able to participate in because basically no one wanted them on their side because they couldn't be trusted. Sontarans don't make good allies. They make good enemies, but they don't make good allies. Because of their martial culture, as I said, some Sontarans are born with a few genetic variations. Now, if these variations are too severe and they're considered a defect, these Sontarans won't just be killed, although it is a possibility. They'll more likely be put to menial labour to perform the lower level tasks in our society, like janitorial duties, cooking, maybe even medical. But these Sontarans still serve, as far as the others are concerned, a vital purpose within the Empire. One way or another, you're serving. The internal structure of Sontaran society is equally warlike in their dealings with one another. Of course, they are a martial culture which are very militaristic, but they also have some divisions within their society, although not to the point of it being like different nations. They have different clans that are different levels of power within their society and are always trying to one-up one another, but this competition is actually quite good for their society. It keeps them sharp and keeps them focused and keeps them basically in a constant state of readiness for war. The Sontarans, aside from their major conflict with the Rutans, have been at war with or invaded pretty much every major species in the galaxy, including humans, the Daleks, the Cybermen, even the Time Lords, invading Gallifrey itself at one point, or at least trying to. The Sontarans consider every race they meet basically to be a potential new enemy to fight. As a side effect of their somewhat isolationist culture, which might not be the right description, but they don't have much direct contact with other races that they're not fighting. Because the Sontarans don't have females, they have a very chauvinistic attitude towards women, often insulting them. They consider an insult to their enemy to be comparing them to being like a woman. But they also consider a compliment to their enemy, or a compliment to an ally or someone they like, as they will state, they look forward to killing them in the battlefield someday. As to the Sontarans, this is considered a compliment. Possibly the highest compliment they'll ever give you. But they mean it wholeheartedly. They are genuinely looking forward to fighting you, because they think you're a great warrior. They would like to fight you. They'd like to kill you. They might even consider it honourable to die at your hands. So, Sontaran compliments and Sontaran insults. The Sontarans also have difficulty with alien species that have more than one gender, basically discerning between the two, often confusing human males for human females, simply because to them we look so similar they can't really tell the difference. They also don't really know how to refer to children, as Sontarans are pretty much born adult. There's a pop-up as a full-grown Sontaran, pretty much. The military of the Sontarans was organized much like a human military, with a ranking system, not unlike human ranking, but it was possible to challenge your superior officer's point of view and duel them for basically who was right. The actual military itself was divided into units, naval and army, such as the 5th Sontaran Army military fleet, and special forces units, amongst others, of course. There were many different units. To be honest, I think I've mispronounced one of those, but you get my meaning. There was different units and different ways of organizing it, but it was organized much like you'd expect a navy to be organized, or an army to be organized, into regiments and cohorts, and with lieutenants and sergeants and generals and admirals, much like human navy. They may have different names for them at times, but basically the same sort of structure. Their technology was relatively advanced, of course, having FDL capability, although they lacked time travel. Their ships were shielded and were armed not unlike human vessels. They were armed with some energy projector weapons and missile systems. They weren't against using bombs. High energy weapons were developed to a degree, but the Sontarans, in terms of their soldiers, the most powerful energy weapon they had was really a laser, which was very powerful, but it was nothing compared to, say, some of the weapons that the Daleks and the Sontarans and Time Lords and even humans would eventually field. They also favoured heavily melee weapons like swords and axes and knives and other such devices. The overall military effectiveness of the Sontarans, though, could not be disputed. Some of their technology may be a little crude, using bullets and grenades and missiles, again, not unlike humans, just very advanced versions of them. But they were very effective at war, and it was something that they lived for. Speaking of their lifespans, a Sontaran could potentially live into their 80s, meaning their lifespan was not unlike that of a human, although humans could live for longer. But the average life of a Sontaran was less than 20, considering an average age of 12 or 13 to actually be a good lifespan, a good innings for a Sontaran. This was due to their highly militaristic lifestyle and their constant state of war. They were dying by the millions all the time. It was unusual for a Sontaran to live longer, although it was possible. Well, I think that pretty much sums the Sontarans up. They go to war, they like it, they go to war again, they want to die in battle, they don't want to die in a bed. They consider cowardice, running away, turning your back to an enemy to be dishonourable. They consider having to do menial duties to be a form of dishonour, and they consider the highest dishonour to be excluded from battle. I think that they're one of the most compelling races from Doctor Who, one of the most consistent in canon as well. Again, races like the Daleks, they're a bit all over the place sometimes. Sontarans, they're quite consistent. You do get the odd individual Sontaran that might behave a little differently, but generally they're pretty damn consistent. And they're just going to go to war. And every time they turn up, you know something bad's going to happen. Some people are going to die. So, there you have them. Tell me what you think of the Sontarans. Comment, I'd love to read it. And that's the end of this video. If you liked it, please like, share, subscribe, bell icon, whatever. Whatever makes you happy, dislike it, doesn't really matter. And thanks for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, you're amazing. And bye-bye.
Was the universe being saved by a Sontaran?